And beginning with our top focus this hour, US President Donald Trump in a press conference on Monday described his upcoming meet with his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin as a feel-out meeting to gauge his ideas for ending the war in Ukraine. Donald Trump has invited Putin to Alaska on Friday, which will mark the first face-to-face meeting between the presidents of the US and Russia since Ukraine's invasion in February in 2022. At the press conference, the US president said that he would press his Russian counterpart to end the war in Ukraine.
So I'm going in to speak to Vladimir Putin, and I'm going to be telling him, you got to end this war, you got to end it.
President Trump also said that he was a little bothered by his Ukrainian counterpart Zelensky's stance and insisted that both Ukraine and Russia would have to give up territory to each other as part of a potential peace agreement, adding that his meeting with Vladimir Putin would test waters for such a deal.
I'm going to meet with him. We're going to see what the parameters are. I'm then going to call up President Zelensky and the European leaders right after the meeting, yeah. And I'm going to tell them what kind of a deal. I'm not going to make a deal. It's not up to me to make a deal.
Trump said that he would know within minutes if there would be a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia when he meets Putin later this week.
At the end of that meeting, probably in the first 2 minutes, I'll know exactly whether or not a deal can be made. Because that's what I do. I make deals.
Trump also revealed plans to call Zelensky and other European leaders immediately after the talks with the Russian counterpart, fearing that Putin will team up with Trump to force unacceptable compromises. European leaders now plan to speak separately on Wednesday. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has invited the French, UK and other European leaders and the EU and NATO chiefs for virtual talks. Merz's office even said that a video conference in various rounds of talks would discuss further options to exert pressure on Russia and preparation of possible peace negotiations and related issues of territorial claims as well as security. European Union foreign ministers met in Brussels on Monday with Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha and others who examined imposing a 19th package of sanctions on Russia since the invasion began. European Union Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said that until Russia agrees to a full and unconditional ceasefire, concessions should not even be discussed. Parallelly, the Ukrainian president has warned against giving in to Putin's demands, highlighting how Russia refuses to stop the killings and therefore must not receive any rewards or benefits. And joining us on the broadcast is Maximilian Hess. He's Central Asia Fellow at Foreign Policy Research Institute, joining us on the broadcast live from London. Mr. Maximilian, appreciate you joining us on WION. First up, do you think the US president has already laid the groundwork for striking a deal within 2 minutes of his meet with his Russian counterpart? In your opinion, will that help in talks or can it impact differently?
President, thank you so much for having me. I don't think President Trump has laid the groundwork for signing a deal within the first 2 minutes, either from his own strategic interests or from those of Ukraine, NATO, Europe, and the wider West. And those are two very different set of interests, it should be made clear. But I think Donald Trump is going to find it very hard to make a deal with Putin on the matters that he cares about or on the matters that Ukraine and the wider West care about.
Yes, Mr. Maximilian, continuation to that same point, talking about the meet that the EU leaders had. It was an emergency meeting that was called on Monday. In fact, they are all set to hold another one virtually, though tomorrow, that is Wednesday. In your view, is there a real chance of Ukraine being sidelined in the talks between Putin and Trump in Alaska?
I think Ukraine and Europe more broadly have been sidelined so far, but that's one of the many reasons, and only one of many, why it will be so difficult for Trump to make a deal. He cannot force a deal on the Ukrainians, who will fight back continued Russian occupation and aggression towards their territory. And Europe, as we have seen repeatedly throughout this conflict, tragically, only really acts when it's backed into a corner. Now, Europe is the largest supplier of financial and military aid to Ukraine, larger than the United States at this point. Of course, it's dependent on buying American weapons for a lot of the key technology that Ukraine needs. But Europe itself has really made a series of strategic blunders in these negotiations by being unwilling to take action to show that it is in the driver's seat with regard to Ukraine and Russia policy. And there's a lot more it could still do.
Yes, Mr. Maximilian, talking about the latest comments that have been coming in from President Zelensky, he's minced absolutely no words in stating that he will never consent to any Russian annexation of Ukrainian territory. But fact of the matter also remains that Zelensky's advisor and Rubio also had preparatory talks. In fact, these talks were held just yesterday. In your view, is there a meeting ground between Russia and Ukraine as well as the US?
I think it would be very difficult to achieve. Vladimir Putin has repeatedly in the past said he doesn't acknowledge the legitimacy of the Ukrainian government, and he would likely require symbolic signs that Ukraine was willing to give up territory before that could happen. So I think a direct meeting between the two at this stage is very unlikely. That being said, both sides being Russia and Ukraine, are really trying to signal to Trump to get him to essentially move more towards their side of the conflict. So they may move towards some kind of an agreement to have a meeting to try to keep Trump on side, but that meeting then actually happening at this stage, I think, would be very difficult.
Yes, Mr. Maximilian, just last question before we let you go. The latest remarks coming in from President Donald Trump, he says that he would be meeting Putin in Russia. What do you make of these remarks? Do you think all of this is merely a gaffe?
Donald Trump is nearly an 80-year-old man. It is often very hard to follow his streams of logic when he speaks. Some of the same issues that he tagged his former opponent, Joe Biden, for. All we've seen from official sources are that the meeting will be held in Alaska, and I think these comments are perhaps more a sign of Trump's age and increasing difficulties in speaking for so long publicly, rather than a change in the agenda.
All right, Mr. Maximilian, that's all the time we had. Point taken. Of course, all eyes will be on that meet that happens in Alaska and also the EU ministers meeting virtually tomorrow. Appreciate you joining us on the broadcast.
Thank you for having me.